Right, so well, we still have a couple of minutes, it would seem, before the start of the round, even though, yeah, I hope I have the games right because no one seemed to start just yet. Yeah, we'll double check it. Okay, some games have started. So it might be, it's online events. So still, there might be some technical issues here and there. Okay, still, what I wanted to say that when it comes to youngster chess, you should not really pay that much attention to a rating, right? Of course, we have some big Elo favorites, like for instance, this guy is playing in the final today, Sean Sargsyan and Nihal Sarin, obviously very, very talented. That's a final under 18 I'm talking about, by the way. Yeah, but if you check the starting list, you already pay attention that one of the big guns, Andrei Yosipenko from Russia, got eliminated. So even in such a field, there are surprises. So if I did my math right, interestingly enough, only in open section under 14, we have the actual top seeds, the actual two top seeds playing each other in the final. In all other age categories, in all other groups, we seemingly have surprises. Right, let's start with something. Yeah, obviously this is already the position on the board. We can try to discuss Bishop B4 check in the Queen's Indian. Well, an interesting line that I believe I've played myself a couple of times. I do remember a game against Alexander Bilyavsky. Um, well, that was for me. That was the only game that I've managed to draw against Alexander. He was a very tough opponent for me. But yeah, but as far as I understand, it was mostly connected with Bishop B7 ideas and playing it more of a Queen's Indian style, basically fighting for an E4 square. So in the game, Black played Bishop A6, which looks like a bit of a mixture of the plans, right? So Bishop A6, you first trying to provoke B3 and only then go for Bishop B4 check. Nevertheless, yeah, B3 played, C6 played, and well, we are drifting towards some Catalan lands, dare I say, like Bishop to G2, D5, and then I presume White can castle short, even like intending to sacrifice the pawn. Okay, the reminder, the system of the entire event as well as the finals. So 2 games only, 15 minutes plus 10 seconds. So, well, real rapid. And in case of a tie, we will have a one and only game where White gets 1 more minute, right? The Armageddon game or sudden death game, whatever you call it. White gets 1 more minute, but Black gets draws. Right, let's switch to something. Well, let's find out if we have anything a bit more entertaining. Not that this one is not entertaining, but slow positional battle, and maybe later on it will develop into something crazy. Right, so boys under 10, well, they never fail to impress me. So once again, theoretical position, so-called Yugoslav variation of the King's Indian. Both seemingly know what they're doing. A7, A6, Rook B1 exactly, and then Rook B8, Queen C2, B5, B3, and so on and so forth. Right, so that's, for the time being, it's just a theoretical position. Same, by the way, in the match for the third place. So once again, very, very impressive. Believe me, guys, when I was playing, I mean, and I wasn't like really dumb. I was considered a bit of a chess talent. But when we were playing under 10, we would know, okay, you have to play E5, and then you have to move the horsey. And if you're lucky, okay, Rui Lopez, and when you go with the bishop far away, you barely can play this move, Bishop E5. But these guys, just look at it. I mean, they know all the latest theory. Okay, Bishop E7, one of the moves. Yeah, even like C7, you have even like early B5 is playable. But yeah, but that's basically what's played by the big guys like Nepo, like Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. This is a very, very topical position, so I'm really, really impressed. Knight to D5, ED5, and then Black typically goes for what you would call the dark square strategy, right? So I'm not sure exactly what the move is because, as I was saying, these positions you can have with Bishop on F8 and some other move played on the queen side, like rook to c8, for instance, or queen to c7. And then black typically prefer to fianchetto the bishop by playing g6, bishop g7. Here, with bishop on e7, he doesn't have this opportunity, but yeah, but knight b6 looks perfectly playable, hitting the d5 pawn. c4 is pretty dangerous because of rook c8. So I wonder what white's supposed to do here. I do remember there were lines where white would just sacrifice the pawn on d5, because this is typically very, very welcome from black side. I mean, if you swap the darks with bishop, black is typically very, very happy. So it takes with the queen, goes g6. King is pretty safe. Sometimes in the center, sometimes goes king f8, king g7. You rarely castle because you've played h5 already. All right, so let me move on. Girls under 10. Okay, so here in the final, we have two players who are playing very, very fast. I don't know if they know everything what they're doing. There was a Slav defense exchanged, right? There was exchange Slav defense, and therefore, yeah, like in a schematic way, apparently White knew exactly what she was trying to do. Knight to e7, knight f3. Actually, quite a venomous system, I have to say, even though, first impression, when the exchange Slav is played against you, you think, okay, I'm playing against a boring person who wants a draw. But not really, not necessarily. So in latest years, White actually has found quite a few of dangerous ideas, and that's absolutely legit a way of playing for an advantage, this exchange variation of the Slav. So takes on e5, trade, queen e5, queen f2. Well, if I'm perfectly honest, it seems to be somewhat too slow. So, I mean, if white was supposed to get any kind of advantage in this game, it had to be queen f4, swapping the queens and trying to prove that black is somewhat undeveloped. Yeah, queen f2 allows black to develop with bishop e6. Now, well, there is no immediate rook f8 because of bishop h7, or possibly there is. I mean, depending on what move white's going to play. Like, say, white plays h3, there is rook f8. It looks like a blunder because white captures on f8, but as in return, black takes on e3 and targets the rook as well. So that's actually a very, very messy position, quite possibly leading to a draw after king h2, queen takes rook, queen takes knight, and then either black goes for perpetual with queen f4, or white can come up with a perpetual after queen h4, and lots of checks. Okay, so that's one of the games that were already quite a few moves played. Girls under 10 match for third place. Interestingly, Diana Preobrazhenska, I think she's from Russia. I'm not entirely sure. Right, she's spending a lot of time in the opening, so that's a bit of a surprise factor when we are talking, when we are talking about the rapid and especially online rapid. Right, then under 12, boys under 12, there's a player that, well, commentators should stay neutral, they say, but that's a player that I wholeheartedly support, from Ukraine, Igor Samonenkov. By no means one of the favorites. I do not quite remember, but he's like rated in the middle of the pack. But yesterday he won against the top seed, and today, once again, he starts this match as the rating underdog. But yeah, let's see what's going to happen. That's actually a peculiar line of, well, it started, let me see, because you can have this from the reti opening where white starts knight f3, g3, bishop g2, and only then pushes the center. Or sometimes, like this, is already a Catalan opening, so it could have started with d4, c4. Anyway, so black captures, white captures, bishop c5, and here, yeah, that's quite normal, I'm guessing, just to take on c6, queen c2, and guess what? We are talking about a Grunwald defense reversed. So it's black now who has a very strong center. Well, more Grunwald it would be with the pawn on e5, right? But still, black has the very strong center, and white tries to undermine the center and sometimes kind of try to use the piece play plus the extra tempo he's getting for the color swap for being white, for like starting the game first. And also, if you paid attention, the bishop went to c5 and then back to e7, so that's kind of a tempo waste. Right, so white apparently has to have a very comfortable position. The question, however, is if white gets a better position here. Bishop a6, knight a4, chasing the queen away, rook to d1, and captures on f6. A bit of a surprise, I have to say, this capture on f6 is. Right, I presume after bishop takes, white is planning something like knight c5. That's the only reasonable explanation I have, because, yeah, of course, you know, we chess players, we really value the bishops a lot. So the point perhaps being that for black it feels pretty uncomfortable to protect the a6 bishop. Yeah, black needs to play bishop back to g7, back to b7, because any queen move would run into knight d7, queen b6, knight d7 would have been a disaster, and after queen a5, same thing, knight d7, hitting the rook, hitting the bishop on f6. So therefore bishop b7, and then yeah, I kind of understand what white wants to say. Well, perhaps e4 is one of the options here. Like e4 looks attractive. You can swap on b7, but then it's, you know, then it's very likely an equal position with opposite colored bishops and so on. Right. Anyway, yeah, a reminder, since we have 10 tournaments, right? 10 finals, 10 matches for the third place. So we have a lot of games to cover. So regrettably, I do not have the time to stop and at each particular one. Right, so moving on. Speaking of big young talents, speaking of favorites facing each other in the final, let's move to boys under 14, where, as I said, it's a unique situation for all the age categories, where the top seeds, Gukesh from India and Murzin from Russia, met each other in the finals, went through their tournament net and met each other in the final. Right, if you remember, Murzin, I think he won the semi-final quite convincingly. For Gukesh, for the top seed, however, he had to play the Armageddon, and it was a back and forth game where he won on time in a situation where I don't think there was any other merit to win. Alrighty, so what happens here? Once again, anti-Sicilian with queen d4, but this time with knight c3. That actually is a very tricky system, I think. Magnus being one of the few who implemented it against, especially aimed at knight of place, right? Because you provoke the knight to c6. That's, I think, what has happened in the first game of Magnus Carlsen when he played this line. Queen goes to d2 once again. Pretty surprising, but white has in mind b3, bishop b2, castle long very quickly, and then, you know, the king side onslaught with all the pawns. Right, after knight f6, white comes up with e5, so yet another idea to go for a pawn sacrifice, to go for an initiative after de5. Of course, not queen e5, which would simply give black the possibility to win tempi with knight c6 and the likes. But swap the queens, go knight f3, and then in case of knight c6, I presume white simply develops quickly, like bishop b5, bishop e3, tries to castle long with a check, knight g5 is possible. Okay, a lot of threats. Therefore, yeah, e6, pretty calm move, just returning the pawn, but I guess in this case, white is getting somewhat of an advantage. So knight to b5 forces black to move the knight to unfavorable square, knight to a6, g2, g3, so bishop will appear on this long diagonal. Knight to d5, bishop g2, f6, and knight to c4. So now, can you really do something about knight d6 coming? Not really that sure, right? So at the very least, white is planning to give a check on d6, capture the bishop on c8, and claim to bishop's advantage, not to mention that he might win a pawn in the process. Like bishop c5 seems to be a reasonable move, knight d6, let's just illustrate that, king to e7, white captures on c8, black, say, captures with one of the rooks, white goes c3 perhaps, and I would claim that white is slightly better simply because of the bishop there. No disaster for black, but yeah, but white's position is certainly much more pleasant. Therefore, Murzin goes for knight a to b4, hitting the c2 pawn himself, and, you know, tries to tries to complicate the position. So does it mean that white doesn't have, doesn't have comfortable way of protecting c2? Because ideally, what I would like to do, perhaps I would not mind sacrificing the c2 pawn with white, but I need a move with the bishop, let's say, to midnight c2 with rook c1, but my king is under attack, right? So it's if white plays something, now obviously it won't be played, but I'm just kind of trying to describe the ideal case scenario, so in which, in this scenario, I would believe in white's initiative, right? But if you have to spend a move like king d1, that feels wrong, right? So really curious to see how does that unfold. Yeah, obviously you don't want to be playing some knight a6 thing. So you might end up playing king d1 or even king d2. As ugly as it looks, there might be some